Welcome to Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations. My name is Patrick Ledden, and each week I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to a senior leader to learn about their life, their work, their career, what they've learned along the way, the struggles they've overcome, and the successes they've achieved. Today, I'm joined by the CEO of Sixth Sense, Jason Zintak. This company is revolutionizing B2B sales and marketing through AI-driven data intelligence. In our conversation today, we talk about Jason's career, what he started to do right out of school, what he learned from those early lessons, and how he applies them today as he works with an organization that has grown from $5 million in recurring revenue to over $200 million. You're going to want to grab something to write with and learn about hypergrowth and scaling a business while maintaining an effective culture. Jason Zintak, thanks for joining me for a C-Suite conversation.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here, my new friend. We had a chance to chat before we got started. I know you're originally from the Philadelphia area, but you're out in San Francisco these days. But there's probably a lot that's transpired between those two moments in time, as far as living in Philly and living in San Francisco. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, go Birds! Since we figured that out, we just came off the Super Bowl. Let's see. Well, about myself, I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, an hour northwest of Philadelphia. Rural, sort of adjacent to Amish country, largely an old manufacturing town. I'd call it mid-collar, so some blue collar, some white collar, but a lot of individual businesses, not a lot of corporations. And loved growing up there. Went away to high school in New England and started my career in Atlanta after going to Syracuse. Studied different things, changed the major, all that drill, young person in pursuit, and lived 20 years in Atlanta and the last 10 in San Francisco. Been in tech most of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the audience knows this from listening to the podcast in the past, but I spent the last 11 years as a professor at Vanderbilt University, and I've seen a lot of, like you said, kind of started off with one major, went after something else, maybe changed a couple of times. That's part of that experience. So what did you start out thinking you were going to do, and what'd you end up walking out of the door with your certificate, I guess probably emblazoned in orange?
Yeah, interesting. In high school, I developed a passion for photography and thought I wanted to be a photojournalist. Won a bunch of awards in high school, and then went to Syracuse for the photojournalism school, which is the Newhouse sort of TV, radio, film school. Started to pursue it and came from a family of entrepreneurs and realized it was going to be really tough to make money. And I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. Loved it, still enjoy it, but switched to advertising as a major.
Interesting. Did you work in advertising at all yourself?
I did in internships. So, part of the things you learn in internships is what you like and don't like. I love the creative side. I worked for Coca-Cola in their marketing department as an internship. I worked for a company called Earl Palmer Brown, which is a Philly area, and worked in the agency world. And ultimately, as I graduated, I looked at the career progression of those in those paths, and I thought it was very incremental. While I love the creativity, it seemed like all the agency owners were a few of them, and that appealed to me. But it seemed like it was going to be a long haul to get up to the top, and so I went into sales, like 100% commission sales for insurance, which was odd as can be. Because it wasn't what I studied. It wasn't photography, it wasn't advertising. I worked for Northwestern Mutual in a 100% commission job right out of school. And that's because I wanted to go faster. It was sort of the appeal. And I learned, I suppose I saw in a career fair, they were like the #1 sales training program, corporate training program, and that appealed to me as well. And so I went for it.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about going faster because your company obviously has had tremendous success. And that's one of the reasons we want to talk to you is just how quickly you've scaled and you've had experience scaling other businesses. But taking us back to that going into 100% kind of commission sales, some people that would just terrify, other people that would excite them. They want to get out of bed every morning and go do that. But regardless of how you felt about it personally, what'd you learn from that?
Very foundational, extremely. So I think the training as advertised and the accolades around sales training was just that. It was quite good. You might ask yourself, like, why would you buy life insurance from a 21-year-old, 22-year-old? I know nothing about life and families, but yet somehow they train me to be relevant and appropriate in these meetings. And The thing I learned was one, it's hard. We were very regimented. So we had a process. We showed up at 7 in the morning. We did our pre-call routine, and then we called from roughly 8 to 10. And then we were supposed to be in meetings, outbound meetings for the rest of the day, rinse, repeat every single day. And it was a formula. And so what I learned was, well, first off, I didn't have any money beyond what little I saved. And that was very scary. But when you need money, you make money. And so that's motivating. And I learned to be a creature of habit and trust the process. A lot of rejection, but also some very big rewards. And the funny thing is, they taught you in this business, when you meet someone, if I'm meeting you, Patrick, after I meet you, can you refer me to 3 of your friends that you might be interested in the service? Of course, most people are like, no way. I don't want to be sold a life insurance policy, but ton of grit and then you learn from those around. I mean, they didn't hire many kids out of college. It was mostly those that had another career and had a network, but they took flyers on a few young people, and I was one of 2 that year. And yeah.
Do you feel like, well, I guess I should say it this way. Sometimes there's these foundational experiences that you kind of look back on. You're like, I'm glad I did that. It got me up to, the next step in the ladder, if you will, or in my career. And it kind of reflect on that. But then there's also foundational things that you're like, actually, I kind of draw from that a lot. I still continue to draw from the grit side or the resilient side or the dealing with rejection or failure side or the ability to follow a routine. Do you feel like these are those foundational things where things that go, yeah, I'm glad I went through those, and maybe I didn't enjoy them at the time, but I've learned a lot from them? Or do you feel like you're still like reaching in that bag all the time?
Oh, gosh, I learned so much from that. As I said earlier, it's extremely foundational in my career to this day. I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I mean, I had imposter syndrome. I felt I didn't deserve this job, shouldn't be in this job. Who am I to give advice as a financial insurance broker advisor to mature adults with families and kids? That was very awkward and uncomfortable. It was awkward to ask you, Patrick, if I met you at a cocktail party, I'd sort of think of you as a prospect. That was very uncomfortable. I didn't want to really socially engage with people for business. But the takeaway was there is, learn and trust the process and learn to be regimented. And I have a saying, like, there's no such thing as working smart. Like, it's the combination of working smart and working hard. And even today, I talk to my employees about that. Like, there's no work smart. If someone's working smart, there's someone working smart and harder than you, and they'll excel. So I learned that. I learned that sort of work ethic, and I learned to follow a process. I learned from my mentors, all of them older, more experienced, that have been there, done that. So that was. Now, I didn't like the job. Like, it was very uncomfortable, and ultimately, after 2 years, I transitioned into software. And maybe part of that was the extreme discomfort of doing that every day, and casually, that sort of cocktail social, like everyone's a prospect, like walking down the street. That was a little unnerving for me as well.
I appreciate you going. Here's why I liked you talking about that was a couple of reasons. There's some people early on in their career who might be going through the internship experience right now, or taking the first job, or maybe moving away from their passion a little bit more to something they think might put them on a different career progression. But they're kind of going through those changes and trying to figure out which direction they want to go. And hearing stories like that of like, hey, you're going to do certain things and maybe you'll have to stick with them for a while, but you'll learn a lot through the process. I think that's really helpful to people. And then on the flip side, if you will, people are a little bit further along in their career. Maybe they're in the C-suite themselves like you. It's a chance to go, hey, take a walk down memory lane yourself and just think about what are the things you learned early in your career that were that might be helpful to you, but also that weren't you don't realize now how insightful they were. And perhaps in mentoring others, you can chat with them about it as well. So there's a lot of greatness in kind of just going through that, Jason, and I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, it was incredibly formidable.
So let's talk a little bit. I read on the front end as I was introducing you, I said you have a company that's revolutionizing B2B sales and marketing through AI-driven data intelligence. And I would imagine when people are listening to that, unless they know exactly what B2B sales marketing through AI-driven data intelligence means, for a lot of folks, it kind of went in one ear, not the other. And they probably thought, okay, let's just see what this guy has to say. So break that one down for us. What exactly is it that you're doing at Sixth Sense?
Yeah, well, we're helping facilitate a sales process, much like I sold and had asked for referrals, like to meet a lead, so to speak. In B2B software, it's let's think of like Cisco trying to sell routers or networking gear to Coca-Cola, the corporation. At any given point, like a company like Cisco doesn't know who's in market to buy their product. The world is their prospect. And so we use a data-driven approach. We collect lots of data to understand behavior of who might be interested. AI, applied AI of across this data to say, maybe it's Patrick right now at Franklin Covey that has an interest in some corporate product, some B2B product. We can see behavior. When we understand that behavior, by the way, it's triangulated to be sort of recency, frequency, and relevant, i.e. high probability or propensity, then we can activate a campaign. And we help companies, whether it's an email, an ad, a social post, a LinkedIn, Facebook, we help reach those targeted possible customers just in time at the right time because they're expressing interest.
So is it like, to kind of help me understand it, is a little bit like, so say for example, your potential prospect out there, a business you're looking to sell to, or potentially could be somebody that your partners want to sell to. It might be looking at like, what's the news release, what news is going on around them, what are they saying in the annual reports, what are they saying in their quarterly calls to the street, things like that, that might suggest, okay, here's where they're expanding, or here's where their new initiatives are. These things might be of interest to them, Cisco. Is that type of stuff?
Yeah. So for instance, we call them buying committees. I mean, the insurance is a different story. I'm selling one product to one person, but corporations typically, when they buy software products or any product for that matter, they tend to have multiple people or constituents in the company. It's what we call a considered purchase. So if we see people over time expressing interest, for instance, going to websites, searching keywords, reading the content that you mentioned, clicking through an email or an ad, and then there's one a month, but if all of a sudden it becomes 30 in 2 months, this is a different pattern that shows expressed interest, and that interest is across a committee of people, and that's when we understand that, hey, Coca-Cola may be interested in networking gear, and we should target our sales and marketing campaigns now.
That makes sense. I start to see some activity going on here. I go, okay, something's going on there. And through AI, we can start to parse that apart a bit. So you've seen incredible growth. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I 5 million to over $200 million in scaling annual revenue, recurring revenue is huge. Question is, like, oftentimes when organizations go through growth like that, kind of hyper growth, they sometimes start to lose what may have made them special at some point. So I'm just curious from your perspective as a leader, when you're taking an organization through, and you talked about just talking to your folks recently, I mean, how do you kind of keep that communication going? What do you do as a leader to help as they scale the organization so that perhaps the wheels don't come off because the culture fell apart?
Yeah. By the way, I think that's a great question. It's really hard to do. The simple answer is communicate, always be on. But we also, if you think about it, we had COVID in this period of high growth. So everyone went away, everyone left the office, and that really was sustained for at least 3 years. And now we have this sort of hybrid work going on, which requires even more communication. And it is about a constant representation and communication of our values, what we stand for, what we believe in, the mission of the company. I like to say, keeping it real. Like, we're human beings. We're social creatures. I apply to all those sort of attributes and behaviors, and make sure that we're communicating to people and employees about what we care about, what we stand for, and what our goals are. And that's hard, but I do think it's the true north that's made our culture great. We've won a bunch of awards for that, the culture. And people do things together. Teams do things. Individuals don't do things. And part of the reason for our success, I believe, is that we fostered that culture of team. I call it one team, and we say this is valuable, and also at the same time say, hey, we believe in sort of high moral, high integrity, purpose and mission driven activities. And I'm not responsible for the culture. I can only set it. It's whether or not you believe in it. And so I ask employees to propagate their own belief if they are on board with that mission. If they're not on board with it, go somewhere else. You got to work. There's plenty of purpose-driven, mission-driven companies that have different cultures, but like what you do and try to learn through your job, and that generally fosters a good atmosphere,
I
I think.
love the phrase one team, and in my mind, I start kind of wrapping around what I think that is, or start to define it. But how do you define one team at 6 Sense?
It's simply that we're all in it together. I rowed in high school, and there's like 8 people on a boat, and that boat will not work unless you're in synchronicity. I've talked about it in some past talks, and it's a really interesting sport. On the surface, it just seems like all work, and we trained a lot. At the same time, when the boat starts to hum, and it's not all muscle, there's a lot of finesse and synchronicity that actually makes it go fast. And that's the part that I love people. I mean, I'm in this business. I started in sales because I enjoy meeting people. Obviously, I hit the pavement in an insurance career. I was meeting people. It gave me a great energy to hear people's stories and learn from them. And we like to solve problems as a team. And you mentioned the growth we've been through. I call it chapters. Like every quarter feels like another chapter for the company, and we're always challenged with some new surprise, some obstacle, and it's how you get through those. And so I generally just ask the company to like rally together, solve the problem. It's a team sport. Be curious, intellectually curious, and be kind to your partner, your
Yeah,
neighbor.
yeah. What
Just be a good person.
what was the biggest challenge in your mind? You mentioned like 3 years going through COVID, and now you've come out and you're more hybrid. But from your perspective, like leading an organization through that period of time, the COVID period, what was the hardest part do you think?
Well, you hit on it. The culture was extremely hard. I worried about it constantly. As I mentioned, like people are naturally social and meant to be around each other and learning from each other and working together and solving problems. And so that was my biggest paranoia. By the way, I do have saying like I operate paranoid, meaning someone's out to beat you all the time. So you better be looking around corners and thinking ahead. And that's how I sort of chart our path, is just making sure we're constantly keeping that differentiated separation for competitive reasons. But it was that, and we did what a lot of other companies did. You tried to engage these Zoom meetings with social, recipe sort of cooking classes and all this other stuff. I fundamentally believe it's not as good as in person, and we are marching towards being together more often and have very structured sort of meets. But that challenge was the physical separation. I think is hard.
As you were talking about that, you said like trying to differentiate from others in the marketplace, and you see that culture plays a big role in that for you. I taught strategy classes for a number of years at the university, and we would talk a lot about differentiation and things like Porter's 5 forces. Folks, if you don't know, don't worry about it, but you could look it up if you want to. But they talk about like threat of new entrants or people coming into the marketplace, how challenging that could be. Man, gosh, you're like at the pointy edge of the spear of like what's being revolutionized right now, right? AI. I feel like it's almost like people discovered fire and all of a sudden it's everywhere type of thing. And I know people work in the space now, man, it's been coming for a long, long time. You're just an end user and you're seeing it show up, but everybody's touching it in different ways. I mean, how can you, I don't say how can you possibly, but how do you, with something that's changing so quickly, kind of stay out in front of it and realize, okay, this is a trend to follow for a little while as far as this new thing that they're developing, or maybe I'm not going to invest there. I'm going to go a different direction. I mean, how do you kind of keep your fingers on the pulse of that as a leader? Because it might seem hard when everything's moving so quickly.
Well, in this current world with all the generative AI and the hype on AI, which it's hype and real at the same time, for us, we look at it through the lens of a customer. And it's easy to get excited about some AI campaign, someone that's boasting to do great things in AI. But at the end of the day, there's lots of technology you can apply towards delivering value to a customer. And so what keeps us sober or real is will this add value to the customer, and can we deliver it in a differentiated way that they will use it? And so if we're making the customer more efficient, more productive, easier to use, then that is the lens by which we deliver or adopt automation, whether it's AI or some different type of automation, agents, et cetera. And so, and believe me, we have investors that want to know what's the next best thing and how can you do it, how can you do it faster, and will you continue to be a rocket ship? There's competitive threats all over the place. We have to stay grounded in value to the customer, and that's what we do. That's how we balance it.
So it seems like there might be times when I say, okay, tell me about an example, and you're able to say, yeah, this really provide an advance for the customer. It was something that we could differentiate in how we deliver it, and that makes sense. That story you look back and go, okay, that was a great story. We saw this thing, we applied it, we used it, whatever it might be, and it worked out great. But have there been times where you've been maybe even pushed a little bit by investors or other people kind of talking to you about it, saying you need to go this direction or you need to try this thing, and your gut, your instinct, your call it whatever you want, your research is telling you, no, I don't want to go there. And when that may have happened, it actually was the right choice from your perspective to make. And then I guess the follow up to that is, and how did you kind of stand steady in the face of doubters in that moment?
Yeah, like a real recent experience where had a board meeting, and it's funny, I had a follow-up call after the board, and everyone's curious about AI and what you're doing and how you're innovating. And I was talking to this particular board advisor member, and I said, yeah, it's interesting. You guys are all coming from right, left, center field, and not aligned. And I got to try to field all these balls at the same time. And he said, yeah, that's typical. Or you're going to get that from the boards. And so the advice he gave me, which was a good reminder, by the way, was stand your ground. Have your position and stand your ground. So if the ball to catch is the center field one, go after that and don't run right and left. And my position in the face of all these, hey, are you going to be, are you doing this? You doing X, doing Y, doing Z, is to say, look, we have a plan. We believe in the plan. We've researched all these automation capabilities and options for technology to lever. And this is what we believe. And by the way, we have a base case theory on why it's the right path. And so it is very much a stand your ground if you've done the research and have the conviction. And if you think about a board's perspective, they're once a quarter and we're every day. And so we know we're living and breathing every day. And so we have to, my job is to be transparent with enough information to build trust and confidence in a board. And it is hard. It is hard when you get comments that are different, like who do I answer to and which one's the right one, and should I bend to the pressure? But at the end of the day, you got to believe in what you do, and that's the true north.
As you were saying that, as you were answering that, you said we have a plan and we're going to stick to that plan. And it just made me think all the way back to when you said, okay, there's a process and you got to trust the process sometimes and stick to the process earlier on when you were doing that sales role, as a way of saying, okay, I'm just going to come in and just stick to this thing. I'm going to work this plan. I'm going to work this process. How do you know when it's in your mind? Do you think when it's the right time to say, okay, I'm going to stick to this plan? And what signals do you get sometimes where you go, okay, this plan was a great starting point, but we need to change in a different direction? That's always a hard thing. You often hear it talked about in businesses. Oh, we pivoted this way, we pivoted that way. I mean, what's Jason's kind of barometer that says, okay, we need to maybe make some adjustments here?
Yeah, well, we can feed off this board conversation. Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of pressure to do different things, consider things, but candidly, that's their job. Their job is to ask questions and pressure test. And so, and even as a CEO, having confidence in our plan, I'll be honest, I'll sometimes hear that question and the left and the right feel like, that's something to think about. And I'm not saying I know it all either. Like, I love the board. To me, it's a collaboration. Like, we should all be critical thinkers of the strategy. And if it's not my idea, I don't have pride of ownership. Like, I love collective thinking and the one team mantra that we have. And so, I register. Sometimes I get uncomfortable. There's a lot of discomfort in thinking through it. Do we have the right plan? But I just ground it in data and research, and then come back with and by the way, sometimes there's a pivot based on that feedback. For instance, recently some people say, hey, sometimes less is more. Don't try to do everything. Don't boil the ocean. Don't get sucked into the hype. Stay your course. Deliver, one great thing, not 3 mediocre things. And so I think advisors, thought leaders, boards are fantastic, provided it's constructive and we're all listening.
So everybody has an Achilles heel. I've noticed when they're growing organizations, some people are like, we have these customers, but we really want those customers, type of thing. And they'll almost forget the customers that brought them to the party type of thing and in desire to get somebody else. And that doesn't always work out well. Or they have the next, 5 new great things. What's the Achilles heel, Jason, that for you personally, you got to kind of watch out for? Is it just all the new bright, shiny things? Is it too much allegiance to something from the past? I mean, what is it for you?
Oh, it's both. So there's like bright new
you
shiny
do have
objects.
you have two heels. We'll take them both.
Yeah. There's shiny objects, right? You see splashy website reveals, ad campaigns on other products. You go, oh gosh, is there FOMO there? Should we be doing that? Is that disruptive to us, or is it just complementary? And so the buyer beware is don't get sucked into shiny objects because it can take you off your core path. And I forget the other heel. It had the thought there. It left me, but
I think
yeah,
it was allegiance, maybe
I
allegiance to something in the past.
You made me think of innovator's dilemma. Like in
Yeah.
one sense, we have an allegiance to our customers for sure, and we want to deliver on that path. At the same time, as you grow and scale and getting to 250 million, you don't want to be out innovated. So you've got the combination of having to service the customer, but also creating new technology to keep them excited. And so someone doesn't disrupt you in the current place relative to like current tech debt, et cetera. And so that's the biggest challenge as you finally get to a scaled company is the innovator's dilemma and delivering on both fronts.
Innovator's dilemma. So Clayton Christensen on that, he was a partner of Franklin Covey's for a long time, and we used some of his content. We used content that he did around job to be done and kind of understanding that. I love to use that phrase "job to be done" sometimes just to help people think through, what is it that the customer's hiring us to do? What is it the organization might be hiring me as a leader to do? When it comes to AI, with all the different things that it can offer to organizations and lots of leaders who are like looking at it going, okay, what can I do with this? What should I do with this? How does it impact my world, or how will it blow up my world perhaps? Is it about getting back to that initial question you told me around, will this add value to my customers? What do you see as the job to be done of executives when it comes to looking at AI and understanding how it's going to impact their industry, their business?
Yeah, I mean, it's just another form of automation. I say just, it is pretty revolutionary, but it is automation. It's a different type of automation. And for me, it's still, given we're an enterprise application or business to business enterprise app, it's that user of our software, is it helping them get their job done better, more efficiently? And so we look at it through that lens and say, and by the way, not all AI is applied uniformly. It's like there's different types for different problems you're trying to solve. And so we look at it just through that workflow. Or is it a workflow? What do they do? How long does it take them? Will this automation, AI or not, whatever your version or du jour is that the right one that'll help expedite or make more efficient this workflow? And that's how we look at it. And that's what I think the promise of it's. A lot of the current AI is making things go a lot faster, helping people process data much quicker. It's a task-oriented advantage, and that's where lots of work is being done to across every industry, across every job type, trying to advance that workflow.
Well, as we wrap up our conversation, talking about across every industry, across every job type, I always like to ask folks at the end, what piece of advice would you give that whether the listener right now is in the C-suite themselves and they're kind of wrestling with some of the alligators you talked about as in the conversation today, or they're early on in their career and they're wrestling with the alligators, doing sales at the insurance company or whatever it might be career-wise, what have you learned as a good piece of advice that no matter where you are, it's probably smart to do this thing?
First thing that came to mind as you're talking is exercise humility. So many smart people in the world. It's like why I like the one team. Everyone needs their partner, a complement. And I have tons of them at 6 Sense. I mean, everyone's got their specialty, their secret sauce, what they're good at, what color's your parachute, whatever you want to apply to it. It's true. It's real. And so I think you need to, I like to go through the world. It's like taking advice and listening. people say, "Oh, you're a great seller back in the day." And I said, "Yeah, I never think of it as sales. I think about it as listening."
Mm.
And so I love to listen and learn from it and then offer a solution. And that humility of sort of being a customer advocate, for me, it has carried on in every single job that I've eventually got to CEO. And so that would be my advice: is sort of be a good listener, be humble, and invest in people.
That's great advice. I was a listener and asked a few questions along the way over the last 30 minutes, and it just blew by. And I just appreciate so much, Jason, the chance to talk to you today, to learn from you. I wish you all the best as you go from whatever number you're at right now to XXX higher, if that's what you're trying to achieve. I just wish you all the best, and please stay in touch. And if we can ever do anything for you, let us know.
Yeah. Hey, Patrick, really appreciate the opportunity. And, I just want to say thanks to all my previous mentors and those that I continue to work with. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Well, folks, that's all I have for today's episode. Big thanks to Jason for joining me today for a C-suite conversation. I hope you learned as much from Jason as I did today. That's all I have. Thanks for joining us. My name's Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go make it a great day.